Right. Well, we are coming up on 7 o'clock, folks. So I'm going to get us started. I'm Renee Casterline with the Siskiyou Land Trust, and welcome to our winter webinar series. We are super excited to have Ari and Alyssa with us tonight to talk about their Sacramento Source to Sea paddle that will be starting in some short number of weeks. I wanted to introduce Ari and Alyssa. It's so exciting to have this big adventure that is being undertaken by two local ladies. And I have a ton of questions for them on how they're putting this whole trip together. And I'm sure we're going to learn a lot during their presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to Ari and Alyssa to go ahead and get us started for the evening. Go for it, ladies.
All right, I am new to the Zoom world, so hopefully, fingers crossed, technologically it goes well. But hey, everybody, we're so excited to be here and really grateful to the Land Trust for hosting us tonight. So awesome to see so many familiar names in the chat, and we're excited to share about our project.
My name is Alyssa Winkleman. I was born and raised in Mount Shasta. I've worked in the outdoor industry, playing and working actually for over 10 years. I've worked as a river guide, a ski patroller, a mountain guide, trail builder, ski coach, pretty much anything I can do to get outside and get paid to do it, really. Rivers are one of my main passions in life, so I always look forward to the summer and fall when I get to spend lots of time on the river. I went to Southern Oregon University and got my degree in outdoor adventure leadership, and just pretty much from that point on decided that I was gonna make this my life.
Hey everybody, I'm Ari Kosel, and I am also a Mount Shasta local, born and raised. Similar to Alyssa, I think growing up in such a gorgeous outdoor community just instilled a love for the outdoors at an early age. So I've been working in the outdoor industry now for like over a decade. I did go to UC Davis and got my undergraduate degree in sustainable agriculture and food systems. So I think that helps fuel a lot of my curiosity around SAC and its roots to the ag industry in California.
And Jamie was unable to join us tonight, but she is this awesome woman that we got connected with. She lives in Alaska. She is a sea kayak guide. She spends her whole summer sea kayak guiding. And she went to school for film and environmental studies. And so she's done a couple film projects that focus on those things, adventure film. She was part of the first crew to do a sea kayak crossing of the Bass Strait, which is between Australia and Tasmania. And she's spent time in Iceland kayaking and really in a bunch of amazing places. And we are so excited to have her on the team. She brings a lot of amazing energy and excitement, and she's really motivated, and we wish that she was here, but we are really happy that she's part of our crew. So our vision is to start at the source of the Sacramento near Mount Shasta, which is awfully convenient because I think I measured it like maybe 20 miles from home, which conveniently Ari and I live next door to each other. So the story even grows more. So we'll head up to the source as far as we can get up this spring. And we're planning to paddle over 400 miles to the Golden Gate Bridge. What we hope to do during this trip is to expand our understanding of all the complex issues that happen on the Sacramento, and there are numerous. And so we're going to do that by interviewing folks. We've been networking different folks that have an interest in the river and have a story to tell and make their living off of the river or recreate on the river. So through our interviews and our networking, what we're hoping to do is develop a story that helps to capture the diverse perspectives and interests of all those that have a stake in the SAC. Some of those folks include scientists working on salmon reintroduction, on water quality, We have conservation groups, we have farmers from small farms to big ag. We have the native and indigenous populations that have lived on the Sac for time immemorial. We have recreationists, fishermen, tourists, and then the river goes through some major urban populations. So what we're hoping to do is just kind of create a story that encompasses all of those folks.
Okay, so why did we choose Sacramento River? It, I think, started as a dream for Alyssa a few years ago, and then she was kind enough to share it with me this past fall. And I immediately got super excited about the idea of doing a source to sea on the Sacramento River, because this river is a really special river for both Alyssa and I. Not only did we grow up near the headwaters, but we both did our first river guide trainings on the Sacramento River with River Dancers, a local rafting company. And I think getting on the river at such a young age for both of us just instilled such a love for rivers and the outdoors. I know for me personally, it was kind of the launching pad for my career in the outdoor industry. So I hold the Sacramento really close to my heart. But the more we talked about it, the more we realized that the SAC is not only important to us, it's important to so many people in the state of California. It supports one of the largest ag industries in the world. It supports a lot of communities as well as so many diverse species. And so we started to get really curious about who else cares about the SAC as much as we do, and how can we connect with them.
So in this current social and political climate, we are living in such divided and polarizing times. And what we really want to accomplish through this trip is to just role model open-mindedness and listening, and not bring our personal biases to the table. Of course, we have them and we feel strongly about some of those, but we want to be really approachable so that folks feel like they can share their story with us without feeling like judged or like we're going to be advocating against them. We're just here to collect stories and learn from these folks. And so at the forefront of our project is open-mindedness. And we have to, before we move any further, we have to recognize that the history of the Sacramento River is directly tied to the people that have called this river home for time immemorial. And we want to formally recognize that the Sac runs through the lands of Indigenous people who have been dispossessed and displaced from their ancestral lands and territories for a variety of reasons, some of which are colonial interests and exploitation. And it's really important to us to learn about what the Indigenous people who've honored the Sac have honored the Sac since before time, and what they are experiencing as a result of Spanish settlement and exploitation and the changing of the river, and all the things that accompany those issues.
So that's a great segue. We did want to provide just a brief history of the SAC. So like Alyssa was talking about, many Native peoples have called the Sacramento watershed home for the past 12,000 years. And the Sacramento watershed has supported their livelihood in so many ways. In particular, they have and continue to have a really strong relationship with the salmon, the Chinook salmon, who call the Sac home as well. But starting in about the late 1700s, that's when Spanish explorers first arrived to California, and they were soon followed by white settlers. And with their arrival, the social and environmental aspects of the Sacramento watershed started to change dramatically, especially with the discovery of gold, which occurred on one of the Sac's main tributaries, the South Fork of the American. That happened around 1848. And with the discovery of gold, there's this huge influx of white settlers coming to try and make their livelihood. And with them, they brought disease, which directly impacted the native populations. And then it brought a lot of conflict over land rights, and they forced many native tribes off of their traditional lands. They were forcibly removed to either reservations or conflict arose. And so with the influx of white settlers, the way of life that had been on the Sacramento River for thousands of years was dramatically changed. Additionally, with gold and mining, it introduced a new type of mining, hydraulic mining, which is essentially just like mass pressure water forced against the banks of the river. And it led to a huge increase in the amount of sediment that was sent downstream. The amount of sediment increased like 100-fold in a very short amount of time. And this led to the Central Valley being impacted in particular. All of a sudden, the river itself could no longer be contained in its normal banks, and the amount of flooding increased dramatically. This did also happen to occur right around the time that like agriculture was starting to take off in the Central Valley as white settlers were making their home there. And so there was a lot of conflict between the mining industry and the ag industry, which resulted in levee wars. A lot of this also occurred just on a personal level, where individual stakeholders would try and build levees to control the flooding on their little plot of land, but then that would have a trickle down effect on their neighbors. And so starting in the 1900s, that's when the state and the federal government decided to get involved to try and do more for flood control. And it resulted in two major water projects, the California State Water Project and the Central Valley Water Project, and this resulted in like huge engineering feats, many of which are still in place today, a series of dams, levees, canals, weirs, all to try and control the Sacramento River in an effort to support the growing ag industry in the Central Valley. So everything that happened during that time has had an impact on the river that we know and love today.
So the river today, it obviously does a lot. It's a very hardworking river. As you can see on the slide, it provides water for over 25 million people and power for over 4 million homes. But the Sac does a lot more than that. The Sac spans most of Northern California and drains 27,000 square miles of water from the mountains, from the Klamath Mountains, the Coastal Range, the Cascades, and the Sierra Nevada. The river system, when it's combined with all the runoff from the north and coastal areas, accounts for over 70% of the state's total water production. The river goes through some pretty major urban areas such as Redding, Chico, Sac, and San Francisco. And except for the lower Mississippi and certain parts of the Columbia and Ohio rivers, the floodwaters of the Sac are greater than any other river in the US. So it's, if you can imagine, before the river was channelized and dammed and levied, it would span a huge portion of the Central Valley. And so, humans realized that the river had a lot to provide. And so it's now used for irrigation, power, and municipal and industrial needs. It's also used for navigation, shipping. Barges and shipping boats go from the Bay to Sacramento and to Stockton. And that'll be something we'll be encountering as we move downriver. And in addition to the river being used for navigation, it's becoming increasingly important for recreation. Folks boating on the river, kayaking in the Delta, fishermen use the river heavily for the spring and winter Chinook runs. And it's also a haven for numerous species that depend on the quality of the quality of the water and the health of the riparian systems to survive. But over the last 130 years, the river, like Ari said, has been drastically altered through construction of dams, dikes, levees, drainage systems, bypasses, bank protection systems. And these were all built to accommodate people living in the floodplains and to provide water to cities and folks that are working in the ag industry. These systems were built for a variety of reasons to solve a diverse amount of problems, but they've created many new problems in their own right. Some of these problems are seepage of river water into the adjacent agricultural lands, loss of riparian vegetation due to urban development and agricultural development, and ultimately restriction of access to the river for recreational use and fishing and to the native tribes. Many of the uses of the river have resulted in very diverse and sometimes super conflicting views on how we should proceed and who should address these issues. And so that's kind of where we're currently at with our state water issues, is like there's just so much conflict over who should get the water that they need, and who really should ultimately make those decisions is unclear. So the source begins near Mount Shasta in the Klamath Mountains. It begins with 3 small creeks that join together just above Lake Siskiyou and create the Sacramento. The river at this stage, from the source down to above Shasta Dam, will be cold and clear and relatively fast moving. There will be rapids ranging from 2 to 3 to 4. And when we reach Shasta Lake, obviously the current dies. The landscape that we'll be going through is subalpine forest. For many of you that are on here, you know, you live in Mount Shasta, so you're familiar with the landscape, but we'll be going through deciduous and coniferous forest. We'll be seeing tons of Indian rhubarb and redbud, and it'll probably be really beautiful in March. The stakeholders are whitewater boaters, recreationalists, local communities such as Dunsmuir. I know the river is an attractant for people coming to Dunsmuir, and fishermen. And some of the issues that are occurring in this area are much less than as you get further downriver. But one of the big things is water rights. You know, most of the water originates here and most of it ends up in Southern California, and different stakeholders are benefiting from the water that comes from our area. And then also just loss of salmon in the system due to the Shasta Dam. Traditionally, salmon have made it up to these parts and into the McCloud River and the Pitt River, and now they no longer can. And something that was really interesting that we learned from Jeff Mount from UC Davis was that it was important to keep in mind that as you move from source to the sea, the number and diversity of interested parties increases exponentially. The steeper the slope of the water surface, the fewer the people fighting over it. So really that feels like everything we've been learning, that up here in our part of the world, it's the water, we just get to play in the water and boat on it and fish and really enjoy it. But as you get further down, folks don't always have that luxury, and there's a lot more to worry about.
Yeah, so as Alyssa was saying, even just a matter of miles downstream, the story already starts to get more complicated as we hit Shasta Dam and the reservoir that it creates. So Shasta Dam was built during that era I spoke of earlier in the mid-1900s. It was part of the Central Valley Project, and its primary purpose was to serve as flood control to help sustain the agricultural industry further down in the Central Valley. But it's had a lot of other impacts as well, primarily on one of the local tribes, the Winnemem Wintu, So when the dam was built, it inundated and flooded much of the Winnemem-Wintu sacred and ancestral grounds, including many of their burial grounds. And so they were forced to move their burial grounds. And even now, a lot of their sacred ancestral sites are underwater. There is also a proposal for the dam to be raised. And this hasn't been approved yet. There is a lot of controversy around it. In particular, a lot of pushback from the Winnemem-Wintu, because it would mean that many of their remaining ancestral and sacred sites would again be lost. So it's a modern tale of, a tribe who has already lost much of their land and who is not even federally recognized, going up against the Westlands Water District, which is one of the most economically profitable agricultural districts in the Central Valley. So we're hoping to definitely interview both Chief Sisk of the Winnemem-Wintu and then also some representatives of Westlands, if we can get a hold of them, to try and understand their two very different conflicting viewpoints. This is just one example of how the Sac has already, even just a few miles downstream from its source, encountered some pretty controversial issues. Not to mention that some of the other stakeholders involved are just recreationists who love to boat and play on Shasta Reservoir. And then also the effects of the dam cutting off a lot of access for the native Chinook moving upstream to the McCloud River, the Pitt River. Additionally, the construction of the dam, so with the flood control, it essentially means that, the river is no longer going through its normal cyclical flooding in the spring, and there are increased flows during the summer season. This basically means that the river banks down in the Central Valley, they never get a chance to fully dry out, and they're more prone to erosion because of this as those high summer flows come down. So there has been a lot of habitat destruction downstream due to the increased amount of sediment and erosion, which is balanced by flood control supporting the ag. So it is definitely a balancing act, and we're hoping to learn more from the stakeholders as we move downstream into the Central Valley. So below Shasta Dam, the character of the river changes dramatically. It gets much wider, much flatter. We'll probably be just encountering class 1, maybe an occasional class 2 rapid. But it does move through some pretty beautiful riparian zones, which are contained right along the riverbank. And meanwhile, as much as like several yards to a mile away, you're going through some of the most heavily developed ag land in California, some of the most fertile ag land as well. So the Central Valley is essentially just a patchwork of farmland at this point, and sustains one of the richest economies, not only in the US, but in the world. The agricultural industry in California, particularly the Central Valley, is really robust. 1 out of every 3 pieces of produce that is produced in the US comes from the Central Valley, including huge staple crops like almonds, rice, wheat, corn, alfalfa, not to mention specialty crops like avocados and citrus fruits. So it's a really complex network that will be floating through. And we're really hoping to talk to different farmers, both large-scale farmers, maybe some also small-scale farmers, organic farmers, as well as hunters and anglers who use this section of the river for recreation and to support their own industry of the fish guiding industry as well. So like Alyssa mentioned earlier, we're now moving further downstream. It means that there are more stakeholders involved. There's more tension over the water, who gets what, and also just noticing more of the impacts of our engineering hubris and the feats of, gosh, California water. insane, but the effects that it's had on the habitat and the native species. As we move through the Central Valley, we will come to an even more complex ecosystem, both on a natural and social scale, the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. So the more I've been researching the Delta, the more I've realized that I could probably spend my entire life, and I know there are many people who have dedicated their entire life to trying to understand the Delta and its vast, complex network of issues. So I am not an expert. I will just say that right now, but I am excited to learn more. And already I'm overwhelmed by everything that's going on in this area. Yeah, so the Delta is just a major hub for California water. It supplies more than 25 million people with water, and 3 million acres of farmland rely on Delta water exports. And that's not only in the Central Valley, but that also includes the San Joaquin Valley, which is California's other main agricultural area. And the tension around water rights and water supply is pretty heated in the Delta, especially with climate change and the drought that California has seen consistently. There's just less water flowing into the Delta, and that's impacting not only the farmers and ag industry in this area, but also the ecosystem and many of the species that call the Delta home. I'm gonna skip ahead here. Before I do that, that's the Delta smelt on the slide here. I'm gonna come back to it. But I did want to add this slide in here, just showing how much farming has radically changed the Delta habitat in the last 200 years. So over on the left, you can see just how rich and diverse of an ecosystem the Delta really was. You know, everything from marshlands and grasslands, even some oak and willow habitat and wetlands, to what it is today, which is primarily agricultural land. And most of the farmland in the Delta has been built on these islands. And unfortunately, what's happening is that the soil over time is becoming oxidized, and it's leading to the land depressing or essentially sinking below sea level. Most of the ag land in the Delta is now anywhere from like 10 to 25 feet below sea level, which means that it's just putting even more stress on the already stressed levee system in the Central Valley. So managing, just from an engineering and economic perspective, managing the Delta is highly expensive right now. Not to mention just how expensive it is on an ecological scale. There's been such a dramatic decrease in viable habitat for many species. Over 35 species that call the Delta home are now listed as endangered or threatened, including the Delta smelt that I talked about earlier. So essentially here we're reaching kind of the crux of many of the water issues in the state, and they're just getting more and more complicated. Right now, there is a proposal to put in either a tunnel or the twin tunnels. It goes back and forth and changes pretty constantly, but essentially an effort to divert even more water from above the Delta and send it downstream to Southern California and much of the ag land in the San Joaquin Valley. And so there are like pros and cons to the tunnels project, and we're hoping to learn more about the different perspectives and interview farmers. Legislators will be floating through Sacramento, California's state capital. So we're hoping to connect with some of the people who behind closed doors are making a lot of the decisions about California water. We're hoping to tap into the really rich scientific community that has been studying the Delta for decades, and interview people like Peter Moyle and Jeff Mount, and then also a rad group of female scientists from NOAA Fisheries. So as complex as it is, it's also very interesting and very exciting, and I think this will be a section of our trip where we encounter a lot of challenges, not only current issues, but also this is where we'll first encounter some of the effects of the San Francisco Bay. So we'll be switching to sea kayaks, probably around like Rio Vista, Antioch, just below Sacramento, to better navigate the high winds and the tidal impact of heading towards the bay.
So the Bay is San Francisco estuary, one of the great urban centers of the world, and it's surrounded by, or was surrounded by, wonderful stretches of nothingness. And it is estimated that in the last 150 years, approximately 90% of the Bay's tidal wetlands have been lost or seriously degraded. This mainly occurred through diking of wetlands previously considered useless in order to make them useful and grow food, and to really develop arable land and salt production ponds. And ultimately, this was accomplished through the filling of wetlands and the bay itself for military, industrial, and residential uses. During the mid 20th century, many cities in the bay viewed the adjacent wetlands as just a void to be filled, and there's plenty of space, and so it was a perfect opportunity to accommodate the demands of an expanding population and a way to increase their tax base just by attracting more folks to the area. Shoreline really continued to develop, and by the 1950s, there were only about 50,000 acres of tidal marshes that remained, which is a quarter of the historic amount. Researchers from UC Berkeley have found over 7 trillion microplastics are deposited into the bay each year. So the bay really gets the brunt of things, and its historical landscape is completely altered from what it used to be. And the native tribes that used to live in that area, they were not huge nomads. They really, in the summer, would be down near the water, and then in the winter they'd travel up to the Berkeley Hills. So they didn't have like a huge reach like some of the other tribes around the state and the country. They had everything they needed in that area because there were so many diverse native plants and species that they had everything they needed to survive. And last week, there was an estimated 600 gallons of oil that spilled into the bay from a Chevron oil refinery in Richmond. So the bay just continues to suffer. And in that instance with Chevron, there's been like a long-standing dispute between the folks that live in Richmond and the surrounding Bay Area over whether it was the right choice to continue working with Chevron in Richmond. And that issue is coming to head again. Over the last 20 years, they've struggled with air quality and other issues with oil spilling into the bay. So it's the conflict is continuing, and it's between environmentalists and corporations with big money and the public. And ultimately, the health of humans and the environment is pretty important. So hopefully that's what matters in this instance. While we're paddling in the bay, we'll be dealing with tidal impacts and strong winds, and I forget who described them like this, but like big fancy yachts that have huge wake and
wedding cake yachts.
Oh yeah, who told us that? I forget, the wedding cake yachts, and they don't slow down for you. So hopefully we us being daring and dashing women will be enough. We'll be brave enough to not get run over by the wedding cake boats.
That's a perfect segue into some foreseen challenges. So thus far with the planning of this trip and this project, we felt so much positive momentum, really felt in the flow. But we are anticipating that there might be some eddy out moments ahead, or just some challenges. The primary one being conditions. So those of you who are living in Northern California right now are probably aware that we have not had a great winter so far, and the Sacramento River below Box Canyon Dam is running at minimal levels right now. So um, if that doesn't change between now and when we're hoping to launch in about a month, it could mean that the first section of the trip will involve multiple portages and could be a little bit bony and dicey. But it could change. Who knows what's going to happen in the next month? We could also have great water levels, and all of this, we are just subject to Mother Earth and whatever conditions she throws our way, not only up at the beginning of our trip, but like Alyssa said, when we get closer to the bay and are dealing with tides and winds. All of this impacts our itinerary, and it does mean that like scheduling interviews is a little bit challenging because we don't know exactly what day we're going to be passing through Chico. So everything is in flux. We also have been feeling that it might be more challenging than we originally realized to connect with a truly diverse group of stakeholders. We're doing our best to reach out to folks, but right now mostly we've been connecting with people who share like fairly similar viewpoints to us, and we're hoping to connect with some people who can offer a different perspective. All this being said, depending on how the flows are and how many people we're trying to connect with, it might mean that we are doing some interviews and resource collection after we finish our actual river trip. And that ultimately leads us to one of our final, but maybe most challenging hurdles ahead, is just how best to represent the voices and the stories that we collect in a way that like truly honors them. And so I think that's something that we all feel is really important, but need to spend some more time thinking about the best way to go about doing that. So ultimately, at the end of our trip, our main project outcomes are a series of educational resources that will help the general public experience the SAC, maybe not exactly how we do, but in a similar way, and get connected and stoked on it. So Jamie will be doing a lot of filming along the way, and after we get off the river, starting to work on producing a short documentary film that we're hoping to distribute widely and maybe submit to some film festivals. We're also realizing that there's no way we can capture everything that we want to and really do justice to the stories in a short film. And so we're also thinking of putting together a podcast series that allows us the space and time to dive a little bit deeper into some of the unique stories and issues surrounding the SAC. And ultimately, we're hoping that our website will just become an educational hub where people can like come and choose however they want to interact with the information available. Whether you're a visual learner and want to go for the film, an auditory learner and want to listen to some rad podcasts, or maybe you just really want to be directed directly to the Public Policy Institute of California and read all of their amazing articles, scientific articles. We're hoping to hook you up on our website and just let the general public choose their own adventure of how they want to interact and learn more about the SAC. We are also hoping that because we are a group of 3 female identifying boaters, that our trip will inspire other female identifying folk to get out there and after their outdoor adventures. You know, the outdoor industry has been traditionally dominated by men, and so hopefully our adventure will just give other women the sense that they can get after their dreams and get after it on the river. And finally, we're just hoping that our project and the stories that we're able to share will inspire more public engagement and increase people's awareness of what's happening on the Sacramento, and hopefully increase people's willingness to get engaged and take action.
So through the film, what we're hoping to create is a compelling story that encompasses all of the different viewpoints and stakeholders that the river encompasses. We're thinking that it'll be between 20 and 30 minutes, maybe longer, depending on how much it probably will be longer. And through this, we're hoping to educate the public and connect all the interests of the varying stakeholders, and just really share our experience. I mean, we want this to be educational for us and for the public, but we're also wanting it to, like Ari said, be really inspiring. And we anticipate having a bunch of type 1 fun, probably quite a bit of type 2 fun at certain points. And I think those are really inspiring things to see. So we're hoping that our experience and our adventure is a great story.
Okay, so where are we in our process right now? We are currently connecting with stakeholders and doing a lot of networking. We've even started doing a few interviews. We're collecting haphazardly a bunch of gear, including reclaiming some formerly stuck together paddles that have been out of use for many years. Alyssa and I spent the past few nights just poring over maps and diving headfirst into logistics. So everything is accelerating rapidly, especially as we're anticipating trying to put on the river in about a month. And we're just trying to absorb as much information as we can about what the current issues are on the river and what we can expect as we move downstream.
We are so grateful for everyone that has already donated on our GoFundMe, and for the sponsors that are supporting us. Rivers for Change has been a huge support, and financially, but also just with advice and feedback for if our plan is actually doable. Like, they suggested we switch into sea kayaks, which now makes total sense, because it would probably take us 3 weeks on its own for us to go from Sac to the Golden Gate. So they're helping us a lot with advice and logistics. Trout Unlimited, Alpaca Raft, Northbound, all the folks that you see listed, they've all come forward and have been huge supporters. And we are so, so grateful. It's just blowing our minds.
We're also just so incredibly grateful for all the grassroots fundraising that's happened through our GoFundMe, everywhere from like $5 to more, a generous $1,000 donation from our 9 angels. We don't know who you are, but you're amazing. Anyway, yeah, we're just so grateful, and we really couldn't do this project without you. And major shout out to Pusher. They have been helping us a lot with some of this front end production work of capturing some of the footage of interviews happening beforehand and doing a promo video for us. We're also really excited to connect with Sam over at River Radius and do some interviews for his podcast as we float down the river. And of course, our host tonight, the Siskiyou Land Trust. Thank you so much. All right, we would love to hear your questions and do our best to answer them.
Thanks, you guys. You did great. That was so fun. And I have a lot of questions, and so do a lot of other people. So I'm going to take you through them, and you can decide which you want to reply. So starting off early in your presentation, Marion and Jack Shaw are here tonight, and their question was, Chico State has run Source to Sea Teacher Institutes for a decade or more. I'm wondering if you are working with anyone at local CSU.
That's a good question. We have connected with CSU, but more for connections with Native and Indigenous tribes in the area. So Jack, Marion, if you want to hook us up with some connections, we'd be really excited for more networking opportunities.
Yeah, nice. All right, and from Steve Bullock, He asks, will you be paddling pack rafts through the flat water? And have you considered sea kayaks for the flat water?
Yes, the current plan is to paddle pack rafts from the source basically to Rio Vista, which is where we'll be entering the Delta, and then we'll be switching into sea kayaks there. So really, we're just going to get real strong paddling our pack rafts, like, over 300 miles. That's just the reality.
Do you guys have any idea what your boats are going to weigh?
We're trying to go, we're packing as if we're going backpacking because we will have quite a few portages. So my goal is like somewhere between 20 and 30. I don't want to go over 30.
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
And we do have the advantage of like, this is a front country river trip, which is not anything that I think any of us have experienced, Alyssa, Jamie, and I. And so we can do pretty frequent food resupplies, which will allow us to keep our overall weight fairly low.
All right. And then we have an anonymous comment here. It says, so impressed with the research you are doing. What is your goal for communication, community outreach, education, or advocacy beyond what is already known that we can support?
Well, I think that we are totally open to any sort of support that folks think that they would be willing to offer up. I think that to me feels like one of the challenges following the trip and getting the film out and the podcast out is like, how do we reach all these people that we want to reach? We, plan on submitting the film to film festivals, but typically those film festivals are targeting an audience of people that already are pretty passionate about the outdoors and recreation and protecting their environment. So a big challenge feels like, how do we reach the people that maybe have never even considered river protection or, an adventure film? So we're super open to ideas for how to access that. And if anybody has support, we would be super appreciative.
Yeah, we've talked to a few friends who are teachers too about, what would it look like to make an educational resource that was usable in a classroom. So that's another avenue that we're potentially going to explore. We're pretty, like Alyssa said, we're pretty open to just trying to share the story of the SAC as widely as we can. So if you have ideas, please get in touch with us and send them our way.
All right. And on that note, how should people get in touch with you guys? Do you have a contact email on your website? You've got your Instagram page.
Yeah, we have. So our website is sacsourcetosea.com. Our email is info@sacsourcetosea.com. And we have an Instagram, sacsourcetosea.com. Really predictable. And we check all of those things every day. So we're pretty easy to reach.
All right.
It's easy to reach while we're on the river too, because we will have cell service and we'll be trying to post pretty frequent updates on our social media so that whoever wants to follow along on our journey can kind of experience it virtually with us.
All right. I'm happy to hear that because I'm really looking forward to following along. So
Hope to see
you were talking about education. So Rebecca Sluss says hi, and she's wondering if you would give a talk to her environmental science class. She says they usually do a lot with the Sacramento River around the spill and the dams. And she says they even snorkel. So that's pretty cool. So I'm thinking you guys probably know each other. You know Rebecca?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So
yeah, we would love to. We could probably, it would be better if we spoke to your class after the trip so that we had more information to provide. But yeah, we should definitely do that.
Nice. All right. And Tanaya asks, how will you connect with stakeholders along your journey? Will you have planned meetings or see who you can meet along the way? You spoke
Good
about that a
question.
little bit already. But.
Also, hi Naya.
Hi, Maya.
We are trying to set up interviews currently, so we have a few lined up already as we float downstream. And then yeah, we also are just excited to chat with folks that we encounter along the way. I mean, I think we can all relate that during COVID, we've all felt pretty confined and limited to our immediate communities. And so we are excited to be in an outdoor environment where it feels relatively safe with masks on to interact with people outside of our normal spheres. And I know personally, I'm really excited to chat with folks that I've never met before and be like, tell me about yourselves and why do you love the Sac and what feels important to you? So yeah, I'm excited for the spontaneous connections that we'll make along the way.
All right. And let's see. Ashley asks, how long do you think the trip will take?
Well, we were looking at maps last night and kind of initially, just without having really any idea, gave ourselves 3 weeks to do it. And it's looking like we will use every single one of those days. And they will all be pretty big days on the water paddling. So probably about 3 weeks, which it kind of like linking back to Naya's question, will make it a little bit challenging to interview folks and like set up specific interviews as we move downstream. So some of the folks that we're in contact with are on a more flexible schedule and are like, yeah, just let us know when you're getting close. Some I imagine we won't be able to do that with, so we'll just have to meet up with those folks after. But yeah, probably 3 weeks.
All right. And that leads to a logistics question that Steve Bullock asked about where will you be camping?
Good question. Fortunately, there are quite a number of folks who have done, if not just sections of the SAC, have done full source to seas, and they've given us some beta on some good campsites, especially above Sacramento. It seems like there are a lot of sandbars and islands that are really great to camp on. I think once we get past SAC, it'll get more challenging because we'll be in more highly developed urban areas. So there are a few like bed and breakfasts along the way. There are a few campgrounds along the way. We might be shooting from the hip sometimes and just hoping that some kind person will let us camp in their front yard. If you have friends, especially along the SAC down in the Bay Area, let us know and ask if we can camp in their yard, please.
All right. And from Rebecca and Soren, they say, this is so great. We're wondering, where exactly will you put in?
So last week, Ari and I went up South Fork to just kind of scope it. And for any of you who follow along on Instagram, we post a picture of us skiing because they don't plow the road. So we skinned up about to like almost to First Bridge, and it's quite snowy. So we're just, gonna be spontaneous with what the put in looks like. We might be walking for a little while. We probably won't be paddling until we get to Lake Siskiyou unless something drastically changes with the weather, but somewhere up South Fork.
All right. Maybe that's one of the ways that people can support you. We'll help ski your gear up the road for you.
Yeah.
You need a pulk. And all right. So let's see. Elaine asks, what % of the river have you previously covered? And are you going to be doing any parts of it in advance of officially starting the trip?
Nice question, Elaine. Yeah, Alyssa and I have both boated the section from Box Canyon down to Cantera. And then we're really familiar with the Sims to Pollard run. So that is maybe an eighth of the entire Sacramento River that we personally are familiar with. But I think that first week, once Jamie arrives down from Alaska, Alyssa and I have never boated with Jamie, so we do want to get a feel for our dynamic on the water and get a sense of each of our experience levels and comfort levels especially since the most intense whitewater happens right at the beginning of the trip. So I think we're going to do a few like day runs where we're scouting, looking for logs in the river since it's so early in the season. And then, yeah, just dialing in our safety measures, because we were talking about it, and it's like your safety awareness and experience doesn't really do as much good for you as it does for your friends. So we want to feel really confident in every single person's ability to be dialed when it comes to swiftwater rescue, so that if any of us end up in a gnarly situation, we can respond and feel confident in each other.
Yeah. All right. And do you guys have a Facebook page?
Not currently. Maybe in the.
All right. Well, you have a suggestion to add one. So,
Okay.
All right, we're going to move on. Let's see. We have a comment here. Loved seeing KIXE on the sponsor list. Are they or KQED working with Jamie and you on the media production or the release?
They probably won't be really that involved with the production of the film, but they want to help us distribute it and release it across all the different PBS stations in the North State. And they also have a program called Extras, where they're kind of like short takes. And so they suggested that maybe some of the interviews that don't make it into the film can be distributed via the Extras, and just kind of start to build an educational platform through PBS with all of our materials as well. And they've also been really great at helping us network. They connected us with the Namlaki tribe near the Red Bluff area. And who else? Ari? Someone else.
They've given us like over a dozen
different
stakeholders to reach out to. So we're really grateful to their support.
All right. Krista Moore asked, will you be camping every night?
Yes.
Yeah.
Although apparently there's like a really nice bed and breakfast somewhere in the Delta, and by then we're probably going to want like a shower and a nice meal. So we're going to ask them if maybe they would sponsor a night for us.
Yeah, you need, if not a zero, at least a shower. All right, so Ann Perry on Facebook asked, have you thought of coordinating with the Winnemem Wintu, who have done this in reverse for 4 or 5 years?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the Winnemem Wintu do have this amazing project called the Run for Salmon, which is that reverse navigation of the Sac starting from the Pacific and heading upstream. And we are currently trying to connect with the Winnemem Wintu because we really do want to highlight their unique story and connection to the Sac, and especially their relation to the salmon on the river as well.
All right. Bridget Shaw asks, so what does it look like when you get to the dam? Do you portage there? You have multiple dams.
Yeah, we will basically take out and pack all our stuff up, put it on our backs, and Box Canyon Dam will be a pretty easy portage because it's just a short distance down the trail. Shasta Dam will be like a whole other logistical figuring out like where we can legally get out and not be trespassing. And so, and Shasta Dam and Keswick will both be pretty big portages and might take potentially an hour, a couple hours. And then as we get further downriver, there are some weirs that we'll have to portage around. Like for instance, there's the Anderson Cottonwood Irrigation District weir that's right in Redding and Caldwell Park. And that'll be really easy. We'll just be able to we won't have to pack anything up. We'll just pretty much be able to throw our stuff over. And then potentially some portages below Box Canyon down to Shasta Lake, depending on the water flow, if we're able to get through some of those areas. Like down near, just above Sims Campground, there's like a 3 drops that we might, if there's not enough water, we might have to portage around. So yeah, but the big ones will be Shasta and Keswick.
All right, we've got some serious food related questions here. Nick wants to know, how many burrito dinners do you plan to have? And Caitlin is asking, how many bottles of sriracha sauce will you be consuming on the mission?
Oh, Nick and Kate, you've spent too much time with me, apparently. We are going to alternate, burrito dinner, non-burrito dinner, probably. And yeah, at least one sriracha bottle per person. So minimum 3, maybe more.
And I mean, as we get further down in the Central Valley, there's going to be taco trucks. So we'll be hitting those up.
Nice. All right, so tell us again, there's a question. Tell us again what you're doing with River Radius podcast. Will that be after the trip or during the trip that you'll be doing on the podcast?
So we're going to, Sam is going to do an interview with us the 22nd. I'm like, when is that? So next week we're going to do an initial interview with Sam where he just kind of gets to know us and hear about the story. And then we're going to have calls with him every week that we're on the river. So it's kind of like a little mini series that he's creating that's going to become this continual feature on his podcast, a source to see feature that where he highlights different projects that folks are doing. And so we're kind of the first ones that he's doing this with. So typically he does longer episodes that go more in depth with someone about whatever it is that he's talking to them about. And so these will be shorter episodes, but just kind of like weekly check-ins so that people can kind of follow along via his platform as well.
Nice. All right, thanks. And then question from Frankie Nasavera. What are you most excited for?
Ooh, good question, Frankie.
Currently, I'm really excited to get on the water. Just that's like surface level, like real excited to just go boating. I think I'm also excited to just keep meeting people. Like Ari said, in a year of COVID and probably longer, I really miss talking to strangers.
Yeah, I think that's probably what I'm most excited for, is just having some spontaneous connections and that feeling that I think you get when you're traveling of being in flow time, of things just like lining up in a specific way where you happen to be at the right place at the right time and meet that right person and have a really awesome connection with them. So I'm hopeful that will happen, and I'm excited if it will.
Totally. And I think too, I just had the thought pop into my head, and this is more just kind of on the like surface level personal excitement thing. But I think my favorite place to drink coffee is like right when you push off from the shore and you're just like taking that first sip. Well, not your first sip of the second cup, as you're pushing off and everything's calm and you just look around and you're not in a rush yet. You're not 20 miles in, you're not tired. You're just like really settling into the day. And I think, most excited for coffee on the river. And it'll be northbound coffee because they've graciously offered to give us as much coffee as we need, which will probably be a lot.
Nice. That is perfect. And I think that that's a great place for us to wrap up the evening. Oh, wait, we have more questions. Okay, so Debbie DeRochers asked, did this turn into a much bigger project than you first envisioned?
Yes.
Definitely. Melissa and I can both attest to it's become a part-time job between networking, emailing, organizing. So it has a bit of a life of its own at this point, and we're just like hanging on for dear life until we get on the river.
And really, the idea did not start out to become this project. The idea was to just go boating with my buddies. So I'm super grateful that it's turned into this. And I remember one of the first conversations I had with my friend, another Renee, in my in my kitchen. I was telling him about this, and he's like so excited and giving me so many ideas. And I was just like, who knows if this trip will even happen? Like, and now here we are, like 3 weeks away, and it's wild.
Yeah, yeah. So we had another question come in from Bridget, and she asked about the dimensions of your raft, but maybe you guys can tell us about like what kind of raft are you taking on the off chance that that's an inside joke question, but curious about the raft anyway.
Yeah. So we will be starting off in pack rafts, which for people who aren't familiar with them, they are somewhere between like an inflatable kayak and the maneuverability of maybe more of like a hard shell kayak. But they are made out of pretty lightweight material. They're meant to be packable, so they can compress down pretty small, and you can carry them easily around portages without it being too bulky or hindersome. So that's why we chose a pack raft. I don't know the exact dimensions. I tried to answer this in a previous interview and failed epically. So thanks, Bridget.
Nice. All
it's
right.
Like 3 by 8. 3 by 8. That's my best guess. Final answer.
Okay. All right. Well, ladies, thank you so much. This was so much fun. And, there were comments in the chat too, people just saying like, you're crushing it. You're doing great. And people are inspired. I'm inspired by what you guys are doing, to the extent that I'm like, what can I pull off this summer? So I want to say thank you, right, for the audacity to start off with an idea and let it grow and get bigger. I love that you said that it took on a life of its own. So that part, I think, is really going to be fun to watch it unfold over the next handful of weeks. And then when you get on the water, to see what happens there and then what comes from the trip. So really, really neat. So folks, if you aren't following them already, do it. And if you don't have an Instagram account, well, maybe this is the day you get one and you go follow SacSource to see. You can go to their website, and Kim has been putting the link to their website, to the Instagram page, and also to their GoFundMe in the chat. So any of those things you can pick up right now in the chat. You can also get online and go look for those things, because so exciting to watch you guys do this. And it's really a pleasure to be able to support you in what you're doing as well. So thanks so much for your presentation here tonight in Siskiyou Land Trust Winter Webinar Series, and really look forward to following you along through this journey.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for joining us. Your support is so amazing, and we're so stoked.
Yeah, we're so grateful and humbled by all the support. So thank you to the Land Trust, and thank you to everyone who took time out of their Tuesday evening to come hang out with us.
Nice. All right. Well, there we have it. Good night, everyone. We will see you again next month.